Let me just see.
We're live.
Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody had a happy and healthy and safe Thanksgiving. The real world keeps going, and we're talking today about something that some of our parents on our chat groups have talked about on and off over the years, which is, tell me if this scenario sounds familiar. Your teen just found out that their friends or peers are having a party and that they were the only one in their group that didn't get invited. It's a terrible feeling. It sucks. It sucks for a lot of reasons because, first of all, we all remember when that happened to us because it seems fairly universal that especially in middle school, those friend groups change, and it's really terrible. As a parent, you feel like you just want to fix it. You want to get in there and make everybody feel better, and you just feel like there just must be a misunderstanding. Maybe if I talk to the other parents, we have all these ideas, but you feel stuck, and it's really hard to talk about to the other parents. You feel lonely. So we just want you to know, first of all, that we relate and we feel you, and we've all been there, both as adolescents and as parents of adolescents, and that hurt is real. So we just thought we would talk a little bit this morning about how we've dealt with those feelings, and if we have any advice to share with you. And I think we might even have a few articles to post that might help give you some ideas on this topic too. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sharon, and Sharon can tell you a little bit about how she feels on this topic.
Good morning. I just heard recently about these studies showing that friendship turnover in middle school is not only common, but completely normal. There was one study that found that only 1% of the kids' friendships in 7th grade were still there at 12th grade. So, I think that's kind of sad because we want those friendships to last. But on the other hand, it helps sometimes to remember that it's normal, because I know one thing as a parent, when I see my kids' friendships turning over, even if it's not an exclusion thing, like they weren't invited to that party, which definitely happens, if they start to drift away from a friend who I thought they were so close with, it hurts me. And I feel like, oh, I should be pushing them to, don't you want to hang out with so-and-so, or have you talked to so-and-so lately? And it's like, we kind of feel the loss sometimes too, but really that's what our kids have to go through. We kind of have to let them go through that. So it's just something that I think is normal for parents to feel too. I'm still working on that. I will pass it to you, Eka.
Thank you, Sharon. Good morning, everyone. Well, on the same line with Sharon, one of the things that I realized was when my girls were going through those hard years is that they kind of felt like they had outgrown a friendship, and they felt that they couldn't move on because of what I was saying, like, she's been your friend since kindergarten, or, and then like the parents were kind of, intertwined. And what I had to do is give them permission to not be friends with somebody anymore, either because they didn't want to or because something had happened, and without not being like exclusive or whatever, but just sometimes they outgrew those friendships. And so maybe the person who they outgrew, they're on that other side of it, and it hurts. But then as a mother, I felt like I should still not force them or tell them that they had to be friends with somebody that they'd known since they were 5. So that was kind of the other side of it. I mean, we had the other, the painful part where they were the ones that were dropped, but the other side of it was kind of maneuvering how they could let go of a friendship. So all of it is awful. I didn't like any of it. It made me like lose sleep. It made me sick to my stomach. My husband was like, oh my God, get over it. But it was hard. And I don't know if it's because as a mother of girls, it's different than a mother of boys. I don't know. So with that, I'm going to send it to my friend Mindy, who can maybe give us the boy perspective. You're on, Mindy.
Thank you, Eka. And I will say, no, as a mom of boys, it isn't different. It happens to boys too, and it's really painful. You get that feeling in your stomach even now thinking back on it. And I just think one thing I did, and I have 3 boys, was to encourage my boys, as hard as it is, to begin to reach out and make other friends. I mean, it does happen. And there's, as you said, Eka, you lose sleep, you think about it all the time. But I do remember really, letting my boys kind of wallow in it for a bit, sort of that spilled milk. Okay, milk is spilled, cry over it for a minute, but then we got to wipe up that milk and we got to move on. And just encouraging them, okay, now reach out. Who else is out there? Who do you see at school that maybe doesn't have a lot of friends? Who can you, whether it's an activity or a sport, who can you try and join and begin to expand your friendship? So yeah, again, it's horrible. There's it's going to happen. I don't think there's a whole lot we can do, girls or boys, except help our kids through it, right? We experience it as adults too, I think sometimes. So along that note, I will pass it over to our vacationer, Emily, who just returned. Hope you're awake, Emily, and ready to go out there in sunny California. It's all yours.
Hi. Yes, I have been awake since 3:30, so I'm not sure what the state of my brain is this morning, but I think one of the things that strikes me about this conversation is I actually had a story in high school where there was some drama over a boy, and a friend convinced the whole rest of our friend group. Like, I went like 3 weeks at school where no one would speak to me at all. And I don't think my parents, I don't think I ever talked to my parents about it. So I think that that there's probably a lot of it with our teens that we don't know about. And so I guess what I've tried to do with mine is just like, when they seem a little down, or, just when things come up in conversation, to like tell my own stories, and like with the perspective of like maybe what that person, what was that person going through, or that may kind of like what Eka's saying, like sometimes you do outgrow a friendship, but you don't have the maturity to deal with it in a kind way, or just anyway, to just talk about it and like not make it something that maybe feels so shameful or embarrassing, but to try to, sorry, there's the dog, to try to talk about it and share my own story. And hopefully that would help them feel a little bit more normalized about the whole thing. Let's see, I'll go to Jessica.
Hello. So I don't have the parenting perspective, but I was somewhat recently going through a lot of my old stuff, and I actually found not really a diary, but my journal from middle school. And I was like, oh boy, I wonder what this is going to be. And it was all just very bad poetry, but like all this stuff about like, everyone's abandoning me and nobody likes me anymore. I'm so alone, and just pages and pages. And like some of it was stuff I didn't even remember. Like it was mostly 6th grade when I was going through a very all-encompassing friendship change. And like some of it was like, I don't even remember some of this. Like I don't know, in the moment, it's a lot worse than looking back. And some of it does still hurt. I do still sometimes, think back to like, I wonder how that best friend forever from middle school is doing. But, I have new friends now who we still share common interests. And I don't know, I'm sure when I finally have kids and they reach middle school and it starts going through the cycle again, it's gonna start all over. But it gets better. I will pass it on to Jody, I believe, is next.
Thanks, Jessica. I feel like a bobblehead this morning because every time somebody says something, I'm like, yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And so I will just say, like, I guess our one kind of secret weapon with our third child, by the way, because we were not smart enough to think this through for the first two, and it actually happened naturally, is that she had a very good friend who did not go to the same school. And so she had this kind of outlet where if something was not going well, and it's not like we knew, but she had somewhere else to go. And that was just a savior. And I've seen a lot of things where they say, make sure they have like an interest outside of here or a friend outside of here. And I will say, as I said, that was a really great thing for ours. But like the other thing this, as I'm thinking too, is, you know, what Emily was saying, I never talked to my parents about anything either. And I think like, that could be kind of the scourge of our generation, because our kids might say something to us and then we feel like we have to fix it. And, you know, it's so hard to stay out of it, but you know, you almost have to. And I guess there are two articles I asked Jessica to just put in here, but, you know, one is just talking about, you know, what to do when your kid gets, you know, left out from the party. And I just think it's some just really good advice about kind of, you know, being there to empathize, but not to fix it. And then the other one was this great one where kind of like, well, should you call the other parent about this? And I guess I would just say that there are many things you can do, but I think one of the things that you cannot do is get involved in it. And so, so these, I think that's the hardest thing, because we all want to fix everything and make this work, but it kind of doesn't usually go that way. So, all right. So anyway, with that note, I'll pass it back to Sue.
Okay, so first of all, we just talk about friendships so much in life and how important, and people talk about their best friend, and it's such a conversation that seems to put a value on you as a good person, because if you're a good person, you have deep, meaningful, reciprocal friendships. And we know from hearing people talk, and from like Chicken Soup for the Soul just came out with 2 books, one for preteens and one for teens. And those stories are so universal and so painful about how hard it is to have meaningful, reciprocal friendships. So it's almost like, you know, we're putting this golden ring out for people as success, and yet it's almost impossible and elusive when you're in middle school, for sure. There's a distinction between, first of all, in my own life with my children, they went to camp, overnight camp. And I would say that sometimes, like Jody referenced, that was, and for myself as a child also, and I remember deeply how much they saved me, those friendships, because they were outside of the social chaos of everyday life. But I also feel like there's a distinction between the stories we're talking about. So friendships grow apart. They're painful. We want to fix it, but it's part of life, and we have to let our kids go through that. The group mentality is such a different story, and maybe it's inevitable. We have to go through that also. But when my kids would say, we all something, don't want to invite her, don't like him, something like that, I always felt like that's where you go down a path that's, you know, bordering on bullying, where Emily has no friend for 3 weeks, and it's heartbreaking, and it's a collective decision. And I think groups do that, even adult groups do that. But that to me is like, how do you overcome that story? Because that's, and I don't have an answer. I wish I had an answer. Okay, so Kelsey says, here, I'm going to share this so we can all see it. My daughter is in 9th grade, and her 8th grade year was horrible. She was dealing with all of this, but I don't know this was an actual thing. Our older 2 didn't go through this because we moved when they were in middle school. When they got to the new school, they immediately made friends. Maybe being the new kid in middle school isn't as bad as I thought it was in the beginning. Wow, that's so fascinating. There's a little appeal to being the new kid. And so maybe you get away with not dealing with those old friendships that are morphing before your eyes. Anyway, I think it's funny because when we started to talk about this topic, I thought about my own middle school experience and thought, I think it's too soon to talk about it. So this whole story lives on. And I guess as many of your teen brilliant women here have said, the problem is that we can't fix it for our kids. We can only make suggestions on how to move forward and find friendships that, at least for the next moment, are working for our kids. Everybody have a good day. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving.